Hi everyone, I'm Rick Beato. Today's episode is part 3 of my series on the history of the guitar. The first episode, entitled The Guitar 1929 through 69, focused on the development of the guitar spanning the genres of classical, blues, country, rock, and jazz guitar. Part 2 was actually split between two videos. The first was the Guitar 1970 through 79, the Decade of Legends, which focused mainly on the genres of blues, country, and rock, and was immediately followed by Guitar Gods of the 70s. That video explored the more eclectic guitarists of the 70s, such as John McLaughlin, Alan Holdsworth, Al Di Meola, and Pat Metheny. In this episode, the Guitar 1980 through 1989 Guitar Heroes, I've decided to focus solely on rock and metal guitarists because of the sheer number of them. I've broken them down into 4 categories: innovators, shredders, blues bass players, and super shredders. If some of you think I may have forgotten someone inadvertently or could have grouped them differently, leave a comment below. Depending on the comments, I may do an update to this video, in which case I will put in the description the names of the people that gave me the suggestions for either the players that I omitted, or if I need to move some of the players to a different category or even create a new category. I'd like to start off with the super shredders. These are people with superhuman technique. When I think of super shredders, the first person that comes to mind is Shawn Lane. Shawn tragically died at the young age of 40 after a long illness, but his playing continues to inspire players today. Next, I'd like to move to Swedish guitarist Yngwie Malmsteen. He's had a career that spanned over 40 years, and his musical style is what is known as neoclassical metal. Let's check it out. You can hear in that clip that Yngwie was very influenced by classical music. Composers like Paganini, who was a violin virtuoso from the 18th century. Many of the neoclassical style players came up through Shrapnel Records. Now, Shrapnel Records was Mike Varney's label, which was begun in 1980. Shrapnel Records had an incredible roster of artists and bands, including the group Cacophony, which featured Jason Becker and my good friend Marty Friedman on guitar. When Nuno Bettencourt came on the scene with Extreme self-titled record in the late 80s, this tune, Play With Me, was a solo that people still talk about today. Let's check it out. Here are some of the other super shredders you need to know. Guitarists that I'd also put in the super shredder category that are not neoclassical in nature are Blue Saraceno, Greg Howe, and Reb Beach. Let's check them out. Next, I'd like to move to the blues bass guitar category. A perfect example of this is AC/DC guitarist Angus Young. Let's check him out. The next two guitarists were in a huge band from the 70s that had a big comeback in the late 80s. We have Joe Perry and Brad Whitford from Aerosmith. In the late 60s and early 70s, when we thought of Les Paul, Jimmy Page came to mind. But that changed in 1987 when Appetite for Destruction was released. Next on the list, we have Slash. Here's a clip from an amazing performance of Jeff Healey on The David Letterman Show. I remember when Sultans of Swing first came on the radio when I was in 10th grade. Here's a clip from Money for Nothing. It's Mark Knopfler with Dire Straits. Brian Setzer made rockabilly famous again with the Stray Cats. Guitarist Gary Moore shared the stage with everyone, from Thin Lizzy to B.B. King to Elmer King. Bon Jovi guitarist Richie Sambora's guitar style was also heavily influenced by blues. This next category, it took me a while to come up with a title for. I'm still not sure that it's the right one. I just simply call them the Shredders. They're guys that were band members of famous bands, typically, and they were great guitar players. Guys like Phil Collen from Def Leppard, or Vito Bratta, or George Lynch, or Jakey Lee, Zakk Wylde. You know, Doug Aldridge, Brad Gillis, people like that were band members that were also great guitar players. I'm going to play them just in succession so you can kind of get a feel for what each of these players was about. Let's check it out. Lastly, we have the innovators. Now, this category is actually different than the other three. And the reason being that to be an innovator doesn't mean that you have to have fast chops. Some of the people in here are innovators of sound. I'd like to begin with Eddie Van Halen. Now, Eddie began his career in 1978 with Van Halen 1, but he was an innovator in so many different areas: sound, playing, phrasing, lines, tapping, rhythm guitar, you name it. Let's check him out. Our next innovator is Steve Vai. Steve began playing with Frank Zappa when he was 20 years old. That should tell you all you need to know. His playing style is really individualistic. He doesn't sound like anyone else, and he has influenced thousands and thousands of guitarists. Let's check him out. Next, we have Neil Schon. Neil began his career playing with Carlos Santana when he was 15. He gained worldwide recognition, though, playing with Journey beginning in the late 70s. He happens to be one of my favorite guitarists. He is an incredibly melodic player. He's got great chops, and he's a great songwriter. Check it out. Randy Rhoads combined classical music with heavy metal, playing with Quiet Riot first and then with Ozzy Osbourne. He tragically died at the age of 25 in 1982. Member of Pink Floyd, guitarist David Gilmour was part of some of the biggest and most important rock albums of all time. He's known for his incredibly melodic solos and beautiful tone. Joe Satriani, or as we call him, Satch, released his first record, Surfing with the Alien, in 1989. He's also known as being the guitar teacher of guys like Steve Vai, Kirk Hammett, and has had one of the most successful solo guitar careers ever. Let's check him out. Steve Morse was a member of the Dixie Dregs in the 1980s. He can play any style and has an unbelievably great feel. Check out this clip. Eric Johnson has been putting out records since probably the 60s or so. I first became aware of him in the mid to late 70s when I heard him play on a Christopher Cross record. Here he is playing the intro to Cliffs of Dover. Our next guitarist played guitar for the band Queen and has played some of the most iconic solos of all time, like in Bohemian Rhapsody. Let's check him out. Next, we have Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page. In addition to being in one of the biggest bands ever and producing all their records, he was also a session musician in England in the 1960s. When somebody says that Jimmy Page is playing and smoking, this is what they're talking about. Our next guitarist is one of my favorites as well. It's Steve Lukather, the guitarist from Toto. Now, Lukather was also a session musician like Jimmy Page. In fact, he played guitar all over Michael Jackson's Thriller record, as well as thousands of other records. Let's check him out. Our next guitarist I also put in the super shredder category because he needed to really be in both. It's Yngwie Malmsteen. Next, we have Rush guitarist Alex Lifeson. I really didn't know how to talk about Alex's playing. He has such a unique style. It doesn't really sound like anyone else. And his rhythm playing and his choice of chord voicings, everything about his playing is really unique. Let's check him out. The last three guitarists are very different than the rest. These guys aren't soloists out in front of the band playing really fast leads. What they do is that they create the sonic landscape or sonic backdrop for their respective bands. Let's check them out. There you have it. Let me know who I left off the list or who's in the wrong categories or if there needs to be any extra categories. That's all for now. Please subscribe here to my Everything Music YouTube channel. If you're interested in the Beato book, go to my website at www.rickbeato.com. And if you want to support the channel even more, become a member of the Beato Club. You can find about it on my website as well. Thanks for watching.